People in democratic countries that are afraid of autocratic tendencies of their leaders need to figure out that democracy is like love. You need to make it every day. This is not something that is given to you for granted. More contemporary, more clever authoritarian regimes understand that the way to rule longevely and happily is apathy. Making society apathetic, making people don't believe, making people that they don't think it matters, atomizing people and persuading people that there is nothing worth fighting for, which is one of the most dangerous aspects of social media.
Hey, Rabble.
Hey, Alice.
So this week we have a really fascinating guest, Srđa Popović. And I'm going to let you tell us a little bit more about him and his background and why you wanted to talk to him. You had the pleasure of meeting up with him live in Nashville recently. So who is Srđa and why did you want to bring him on the show?
Srđa rose to global prominence when he led the movement to overthrow Slobodan Milošević in Serbia. And he became a member of parliament and then decided that he didn't want to be a politician. He wanted to go and train people on how to overthrow dictators, how to preserve democracy, how to engage in social change. And he has an organization called Canvas where they teach people how to build a democratic, pluralistic society and how to oppose authoritarians. And so we talked about what it means to defend democracy, very relevant in the United States today. And we talked about the way in which technology and social media plays a role in building those movements, but it's a not deterministic thing. So what people need to do is they need to realize that these are tools and they don't work on their own without people using them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And if my memory serves me right, when Slobodan Milošević was pushed out, it was not during an era of social media and technology in the hands of every citizen journalist. So he's seen a lot of changes throughout his life and career as an activist and politician, I would imagine.
Absolutely. When they had that revolution in the late 1990s, they were putting up flyers and going on radio stations and setting up pirate radio stations and organizing in the streets, very much like Tahrir Square in Egypt or Occupy Wall Street. But since then, he's become an expert on how do we use social media, how do we use all the tools available to facilitate movements for social change.
Super. Well, it's, as you said, very timely. So let's take a listen.
I wanted to have you on the podcast because we've crossed paths a number of times over the years, and you're someone who has an experience as an activist dealing with authoritarian regimes. You helped overthrow Slobodan Milošević, and then through that work have learned how to help preserve democratic regimes, help preserve open societies, and help resist the rise of authoritarianism. And so much of what we talk about on social media or so much we talk about politics is a concern about the politics of society, of the structures of society, of the preservation of democracy. So I want to know if you could just start off telling a little bit of your story, how you became an activist and how you reached the world. And then we can talk about the way in which people resist authoritarianism and the way in which authoritarianism exists today, which is very different than the past.
Okay. So thank you for having me. My name is Srđa Popović. I know it's difficult to pronounce.
It's very difficult. Sorry.
Srđa. My beginnings were in a young age. I was living in a beautiful country called Yugoslavia, which later fell apart in 6 civil wars. So we have six countries for the price of one. One of them is Serbia, where I'm coming from. At the age of 17, I thought the activism is for old ladies fighting for the dogs' rights or something very exotic. I was playing a bass guitar in a Serbian goth rock band, which was the pathetic version of Sisters of Mercy. I was studying biology. So like most of the people I met throughout this last 3 decades of my activist work, I'm more like activist from incident. That was not something I intended to be. The situation makes activists 1990, the guy called Slobodan Milošević came to power and destroyed everything. Like destroy the country, destroy the idea that we are one nation, turn it into the small 6 nations, destroy the identities, destroy the values, destroy the economy to the level where we had 100% hyperinflation a day, and then make everybody run, including my own brother, because if you are a part of the Serbian that time National Guard, you will be recruited and sent to kill Croats. A lot of people didn't want to do that. So faced with that choice, you can either fight or flee. And Serbs are stubborn, so we decided to stay back and fight. I was involved in students' protests 1992, 1996, 1997, 1998. We figure out that we need to do the thing ourselves, formed a movement called Otpor, which is the Serbian word for resistance, built from 11 people to 20,000 people, mobilized the youth, used a lot of creative tactics, think pretty strategically, which is not something that Serbs do often, and finally defeated Milošević in the elections in 2000, persuaded him to leave because he stole these elections through mass protests and general strikes.
You not just had to win the election, that you had to then have the movement to enforce the victory.
Absolutely. And looking into like recent history, we had situations where dictators ran away with the stolen elections. Maduro is one of the cases. He clearly lost election, but there was no plan B for the opposition. Okay, we win, he steals, and then what we do. So planning is one of the quintessential things in building nonviolent movements. And you need to plan not only to overthrow the dictator, but how to establish democracy. Otherwise, you end up in Egypt, being very successful in ousting Mubarak and then getting the worst version of Mubarak, Sisi, after that. What happened after was really interesting and shows the power of the narrative and shows the power of documentary. I spent 3 years sitting in the Serbian National Assembly. I was elected member of the Serbian parliament after revolution. I was trying to change the beast from the inside, which was not the most thrilling years of my life. I'm not a tie and a jacket and amendment guy, certainly. More like a Converse sneakers guy like you. Looking into this, there was this documentary called Bringing Down the Dictator, which is now also available on YouTube. And it was a very compelling story about the Serbian revolution. One rich man decided to translate it into 36 different languages. So the movie started cruising. That was the time where movies had their physical body called DVD, and ended up in amazing places. And before we know, we were overwhelmed by Georgians who wanted to do their revolutions, Ukrainians who wanted to do their revolutions, Zimbabweans. An organization was made on a balcony of a Cape Town hotel while training Zimbabweans. And some of them became successful, like Ukrainians and Georgians at the time. And then we decided to form this organization called Canvas, which is Center for Applied Nonviolent Action and Strategies. And what we do, we basically teach people how to build movements. So yes, situations are very different if you're fighting to change a corrupt school board in Nashville, Tennessee, comparing with fighting the Iranian regime. But the principles and tools you need are very unison. You need to know what you want first, instead of just being pissed off with how the situation is. You need to formulate the change, which is called Vision of Tomorrow. You need to map the battleground, because people power movement depend on people. You need to understand how to move from the extreme, which is your position today, into mainstream. Like building from the middle is the most important thing in this stage. Understanding how to plan your strategy, plan your tactics, and eventually figure out how to do it with mobilizing the large amount of the people, staying nonviolent. Nonviolent discipline is one of the key elements of success of these movements. Nonviolent movements are twice more likely historically to succeed than those that are throwing Molotovs. And figuring out the whole story. So here we are, 25 years in my work. We worked with people from 50 plus different countries. And once again, the situations are not the same. The level of oppression, the range of political space is very different. The issues are different. We ended up working with anti-corruption movements, environmental movements, but the principles that you need are all the same.
Building a social movement is a essential set of tools, and through Canvas you've been teaching people how to do this. And part of why I wanted to talk to you is because I see so many activists who think that the viral video or the viral tweet or building a big audience on social media is going to be enough to change the world. Let's just deal with the genocide in Gaza by posting videos about it. Or when George Floyd was killed in the US 5 years ago, well, just put a black square on my Instagram account and that will address it. And what your work does is look at what you actually need to shift power in societies. And it's the social media is part of it, the media is part of it, but it isn't what builds the coalition.
You get involved in activism by doing things, which is why people in activism very often are obsessed with tactics. All the things you mentioned, from viral videos to protests, putting things on a symbolic public act, whether online or offline, are
occupying a building or
they're all
blockading things or chasing ICE around the city.
Absolutely. So it's all tactics. In order for a movement to be successful, you need to distinguish between strategy and tactics. You also need to distinguish between the protest and the movement. So these are the two different things. I'll start with the most common answer I get from people when we start working with them. They often say, "Oh, I'm too busy doing things. I don't have time for planning." If I was given a dime every time I've heard that, I'll probably have a private plane. Unfortunately, I wasn't. So I drive a 2012 old Buick. Looking into these things, it's like you really want to zoom out. So what makes movement successful is, first of all, having vision, building unity between the different groups. That very often means talking to the people you disagree with. Historically, very successful movements were unlikely coalitions of weird partners. Suffragette movement is very often credited for getting women right to vote in this country. It was the large, vast number of church-based women conservative groups that were aligning with liberal suffragettes in order to stop their men from drinking. Which is why one of the first laws that first female elected house in US was brought was prohibition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they had this weird coalition between conservative churches and liberal women who had decided together that they had mutual interest in giving women the vote.
It's not only US. One of the most important movements in a so-called second wave of democratization was in Poland. And there was this communist-occupied country run by almost 1 million Soviet troops. And the movement was consisted of blue-collar shipyard workers led by Lech Walesa, whose main aim was to get some labor rights, right to unionize, rights to strike, things of that kind. Urban intelligentsia, which understood that the communist model is crap and is going into the trash can in 80s, late 70s, and the Roman Catholic Church. So not really the people you would expect to see in a bar around a beer. The key here is, if you want to be successful, you need to move into mainstream. Take a look at the environmental movement. It started as a bunch of hippies tying themselves for the fences of military bases in the 60s. It ended up with environmental protection agencies. So what you want to do, like in football, which Americans wrongly call soccer, they have their own version that they call football, you need to control the middle field. And this is the way how you win. So understanding that it's not about the protest, viral video, or the post. Yes, it is in a second instance. The first instance, you want to take a look at the battleground. If you want to change the thing through people power movement, you need people. People on any single issue in the world are mostly in a gray zone. So it's not too many people are ultra-religious, not too many people are aggressive atheists. To take a look at this, most of the people are somewhere in between. So you need to figure out how to conquer the middle, how to pull the middle to your side. Basically, coming back to your original question, the role of social media. So because the people spend a lot of time on social media, because the people get informed from social media, because the people get their fashion products on the social media, people are obsessed with it. But this is the tip of the iceberg. So first of all, yes, social media changed the way the movements operate. The technology generally changed the way how the movements operate. And if you take a look at the movements of nowadays, they're a little bit different animals than the organizations in 80s and 90s and even my movement in late 2000. Previously, we had a group that would structure around a set of values, publish out their strategic document, sometimes called manifesto or whatever, and then try to mobilize and organize people in a real world around it. Now you have triggers. What you mentioned is a trigger. George Floyd video is a trigger. And yes, nowadays movements are very often launched by the trigger that make them very horizontal, very fast to spread, very difficult to oppress, because you don't know where the thing will pop up.
Just like Trump is like, I'm going to ban Antifa. And you're like, there's no specific organization, Antifa. It's like banning the idea of anti-fascism. There's, lots of people just identify with it.
But also everywhere else, you have this trend of numbers growing around the trigger. And this trigger can be something that happens online. This trigger very often, like in Serbia, can be stolen elections.
Yep.
Or a big corruption case, which is not prosecuted. These movements of nowadays have their advantages and disadvantages. Advantages because it's horizontal. The people have large ownership on it. And one of the things that you want in a movement that people feel like they're shareholders. So they're not just following the lead, they're investing.
Yeah.
The more they invest, the more they're likely
They're part of something. It's theirs.
It's theirs. It belongs to them. And this is an amazing thing with contemporary movements. However, what's wrong and what's really, hurting these movements is this inability for decision making.
Yeah.
Because you have a trigger that sparked a lot of things, you don't have a central decision-making body. Movements need to be led. They can be centralized or completely decentralized, but they need some kind of leadership. Because eventually, there is a thing that you want to change, there is a clear request that you want to achieve, there will be some kind of coalition, some kind of negotiations. Who is going to do it? Internet is not going to do it. So it's like, this is a very naive idea that movements can be leaderless only because they are online. Movements need to be led. But speaking more generally, you were talking about the structures. Every single movement in nowadays needs is this re-evaluating what they want to achieve. Change in the society is done through institutions. These institutions and organization, which in our theory are called pillars of support, you can imagine the building standing on the pillars, the building is status quo. So if you want to change the status quo, not necessarily the government, but the status quo about anything, what you want to do is pulling pillars on your side. That means you think structurally. You're thinking about which pillar is more accessible, which is more important, and put them in certain order. That order is your strategy. So strategy is the shortest causal chain through institutions between you and the change you want to achieve. The moment the movement start thinking this way, structurally, strategically, that very much changes the way you see tactics.
Yeah.
Because then you see tactics as the way to pull pillars. And you start by recognizing the pillars. So, example from American history, which probably a lot of your listeners know, when you say, Montgomery bus boycott, Rosa Parks, my 11-year-old kid, which goes to the elementary school, say, that's the brave lady that decided not to stand when the white person entered the bus. Then the whole thing.
It's a myth. Everyone knows the story of Rosa Parks.
And movements need story.
Yeah.
Stories are inspiring. Stories are great. And especially stories about the brave, deprived individuals who stand to power actually inspire you because it could have been you.
Yeah.
So this is like people can relate to story.
Yeah.
But when you take a really zoom out from there and you figure out the moment in history and you understand that on a federal level in US, there is a great propulsion of the civil rights movement. And on the coasts of US, you had everything being at the point more or less desegregated. But because of a very confederal nature of United States, it is the governor of Alabama or Tennessee that will decide about buses. And now you're going there and you figure out that there is a strategic advantage of the movement understanding this micro situation. And then you dig a little bit deeper, bump into a gentleman who recently died, who is one of my greatest inspiration, Jim Lawson. He was one of the main organizers for a civil rights movement in southern states. And you understand the structural pillar thinking. My goal is desegregation. I have this amount of the mobilized Afro-Americans. I have this amount of the people who support them who are white. What if I put all of these people in front of the governor's building? Nothing happens. Because the governor is elected by very people who don't want buses desegregated.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to pee in the same toilet as Afro-Americans.
Yeah.
So you can use this thing, which is called your resources, and put them in front of the wrong pillar and achieve nothing. So now you're looking into this thing and you're putting your strength.
Because it doesn't matter how many people in the opposition protest in front of it. He knows that his supporters
they will re-elect.
They will re-elect him because he has systemic systems of the voting systems and the power and disenfranchisement. And so he doesn't care.
He doesn't care. But bus companies do care. This is where it becomes strategic. Understanding that majority of users of public transportation in Montgomery are the people of color, because the white people do have cars.
Yeah.
Understanding that the tactic of non-cooperation instead of tactic of protest, you have a tactic of non-cooperation, we are boycotting buses. Will harm these companies, and making a link between the owners of these companies and the mayor and the governor. Because then these guys are losing money. And they are running into mayors and governors saying, please desegregate them. So you are pulling the pillar of private business.
Because they have economic power, because they have political power.
Absolutely, because if they don't drive in the buses, the companies are losing money. And then understanding that the buses are vulnerable, but also the malls are vulnerable, especially the malls where majority of the users are Afro-Americans. And then these malls have food courts. And in the food courts are segregated. So if we occupy the food court and boycott the mall, then the mall owner will say, okay, what is happening here? I'm losing money, I'm losing customers. And behind this is this stupid idea that I can take money from Afro-Americans when they shop for sneakers, but they cannot eat in McDonald's or whatever was in a food court at that time. That makes no sense to me. Let's desegregate the food court.
The bus companies or the mall owners, they might be racist, they might support segregation, but they care more about their businesses, their economic stuff. You don't have to convince the business community of the bus owners that they should no longer believe in segregation. You just have to make the cost of segregation
higher than the
cost of keeping it going.
Absolutely. Success in nonviolent movement, whether this is a desegregation or change of the government, comes with understanding that if you increase the price of status quo, this is where the things come in. So instead of thinking about the viral video or the tweet, which are all good supplements to the good strategy, and yes, good viral video of Afro-Americans being dragged from the food courts will probably work today.
Yeah.
In a Twitter time, okay?
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, the reason why this movement is successful is because they understand that this is where they need to hit instead of this is where they need to hit. And strategic targeting with tactics is what distinguishes between these movements, successful movements, and the people who go to protest and then go back home. But coming back to the civil rights movement and coming back to something else you said building from the middle. There also needs to be a segmentation in how you achieve your goals. And there is another documentary called The Force More Powerful, which actually has actual footage from the church where people are preparing to go and strike the food courts.
Yeah.
And I think this is this famous church which was later bombed in Montgomery, Alabama. So here's this guy, Jim Lawson, he's talking from a stage, and there are white and black people in the audience, and he says as following: I want you all to appear tomorrow on our march in your best Sunday church outfit. Because we want to be this prejudice that, the black people are homeless and dirty and whatsoever. I want you to walk in pairs. And I want a white person walking next to the black person, because this is not the movement of Afro-Americans, this is the movement of all Americans. Then he stops, takes the air, and says, but I don't want to see the black man talking next to the white woman. We are not ready for this yet. So understanding how even the media appearance,
because he knew that they should be able to do there, but he also knew that particular image in combination undermined these strategic pillars of the people in the middle who were strategically important in order to undermine the economic and social political power of the segregation.
Absolutely.
Because it scared them too much.
Yes, but this shows the very strategic mind of these organizers. And everywhere you see these things is like making a large social change means eating an elephant. And you can eat the elephant, but you need to chop the elephant into the small chewable bites. So understanding that first we are going to do this, and then first we are going to do that, and first we are going to desegregate buses, and then we are going to desegregate malls, and eventually the marriage between the black man and the white woman will become so mainstream that nobody can judge it. Understanding this big change, but also breaking it down into the small doable things is what movements need. This is what we call strategy. Understanding the big thing, but being able, and this is what Canvas trains people on our workshops, is understanding that your most important planning is planning backwards. So you envision this big change that you want to achieve, but if this is going to happen, what needs to happen a week before, 3 weeks before, and then all the way towards nowadays. So once again, strategic planning, understanding that you're building from the middle, and selection of right tactics targeted to the very pillars that you want to sway.
I mean, you see the same thing with gay liberation, where Harvey Milk very clearly wore a very conservative suit. He tried to not upset too many people. And there were radical stuff going on, but he presented the acceptable, the politician that could then get elected to the San Francisco City Council as a way of bridging that thing, because then people could see him and they're like, oh, well, this looks like someone who isn't scary.
Even more, I love that you mentioned Harvey Milk. By the way, for your listeners, if you want to see understanding on how you move from extreme to the mainstream, watch Harvey Milk. Aside of the fact that Sean Penn is amazing, it's a great educational tool. One of the most important victories in the LGBTQ movement, election of an openly gay person to an office, Harvey Milk, to the Council of San Francisco, was not built on the gay rights, was built on dogs' poop. Okay, this is how the story goes. So Harvey Milk runs on a platform of gay rights. And when you look at the movie, you see his beginnings. He's a soapbox preacher, like this annoying guy who sits on the soapbox and preaches on the street. And then he moves into his suit phase because he understands that if you're getting into mainstream, you need to identify with the mainstream of the people. And he runs 3 times. Every time he loses, even when he takes a woman as his media person. Until he figures out that that's one of the first things you want to do in a movement, you want to listen to the constituencies. So it's not like you going there and preaching them how you're going to take them into marvelous future. You need to figure out why people would move. People are the most selfish animals on the planet. I'm a biologist, so I think we are all the animals. And coming from the point that, when we build a city, nothing fucking lives in the city, like pigeons and rats and ants, we destroy everything, cover it with concrete, all the way to how we screwed up the planet, like by using fossil fuels for us and for all of the other species. So people will move and join if they see something for themselves. Back to Harvey Milk's story. When he was polling people on his third run, it appeared to be that the largest concern of the people of San Francisco was the dog's poop. So the moment when he steps in front of the camera in his suit, and he was very media savvy, steps into the dog's poop, takes a disgusted look into his smelly shoe, and say, whether gay or straight, I'm going to curtail this. So it's like that's not abandoning the idea of the movement.
No, he didn't abandon his queerness or anything else.
No.
But he figured out what the leverage points were.
And then, like, when you put this in a context of divorce, it's like, if you are the guy who is going to solve my main problem, why the heck would do you wear glasses? You have a long hair, short hair, gay, straight, whatever. It's like getting to the people to the point where you can pull what they feel and kind of embody this. It's a kind of the wisdom of the movements.
So we've talked a lot about the history of social movements, how they grow and how you build these pillars and how you need to build these coalitions of change and figure out how to engage them. We have today a concern about authoritarianism, a concern around this idea of democratic backsliding into authoritarian regimes. People obviously are concerned about Trump, but you see it in many other countries. You see it in Hungary, you see it in Russia, you see it in Turkey, you've seen it in Serbia as it's a struggle back and forth. People in the US in particular tend to have this idea where they look back to the 1930s and they look back to this particular kind of fascism and authoritarianism where the state controls all publications and they're very concerned about anyone passing out a pamphlet or a flyer. And they have this idea of this totalitarian information control. But the world we have today is not like that at all. And it's not how authoritarians undermine democracy. If you go into China or you go into Russia or Hungary or Turkey or any other places, there is social media. People have voices, but you have a manipulated system. And I wonder if you could talk about the way in which authoritarian power works today with the internet, with social media, because it's really quite different than our images of the past.
Absolutely. The way the world changed with social media was in 2 very different directions. It became better and worse, which is more or less with any of the technology. I think one of the main concerns for activists worldwide and the main reason why we are leading this conversation on a Bitcoin and activist conference, is to understand how to be ahead of the curve. Understanding that world changes in technology and that the place is not going to be the same, like looking in the future, understanding what this future brings. So looking into modern authoritarianism, there is a great book done by Will Dobson called Dictators' Learning Curve. So there was this moment in time where social media sparked Arab Spring. This was the big wave of change.
The Twitter revolution, we all of a sudden, it's all going to be great.
And there are certain things that social media bring to the movements that were not there before. You can organize people at one place faster, safer, and cheaper than putting a leaflet. You put a viral video and everybody's on the street. Second, people can learn horizontally. That's the most important effect of social media, is that if people at place A exercise something successful, people in place B can see it and replicate it without any kind of intermediary. You don't need Srđa to teach you how to do this. But basically, it's also a big trap because it leads us into the post-truth world. It comes with a large portion of whataboutism, plus dictators invested more money in it. And understanding that, it's like whatever you tweet, there will be a troll farm somewhere from India, destroying your character in 15 seconds, or figuring out how this is used for surveillance, this is used for a history of your habits, going all the way to Cambridge Analytica, where social media get you to the place where you can sell the message of Brexit, segmented depending on what people are buying on Google. So it's kind of scary world as well. You need to understand the engine of autocracy. So it's not about, once again, the social media are the symptom of it. If you ever played a video game, you know that, if you kill so many Nazi zombies, then you get a certain amount of point. And then it's like your shield becomes better, or your gun becomes better, or whatever game you're playing. At the same time, if you get hit enough times, you lose life. So that's the engine of the video game. Engine of contemporary authoritarianism is different than the engine of the authoritarianism in the past. Two most important powers that hold status quo in autocracy are fear and apathy. Previous autocracies before social media, they were mostly relying on fear. If you build your government relying on fear, well, somebody said it's great. It's like, this is why all of these authoritarian governments are stable until they're not.
Yeah.
So fear is a very powerful tool to keep people in bay, but fear comes with price. Iranian government is a typical case of expired dinosaurs ruling on fear.
Yeah.
People wake up, they increase the level of oppression. People do protests for covering the hair, they bring more religious police. People mutiny in madrasas, which is their female high school, they bring the members of National Revolutionary Guard as deans. Okay, so resistance grows, oppression grows.
They arrest some people and execute some people, and then you don't want to be there, so no one else will stand up, and because you don't want that to happen yourself, and you can't change the system, so the solution is just shut up about your dissent.
But when you take a look at it from the point of ruler, it's a really difficult way to rule, because in Iran you need to police 60 million people, and that costs money, which Iranian government doesn't have, which is why it is likely to collapse in the next 2 years.
And you need to convince all those police that they're bought into it. Because one of the things that surprised me when I looked at the history of revolutions is one of the final things that happens when a regime collapses is the police or the military say, I'm not going to do this anymore. Syria, Bashar, collapsed very, very quickly, like incredibly powerful regime. And all of a sudden it was gone. And it was because the police and the military, they basically stopped believing. They didn't believe that the system
and they were not paid enough.
They weren't paid enough. They weren't got enough. And they're just like, fuck this.
Absolutely.
And then it was gone like that.
And this is why they look stable until they're not. More contemporary, more clever authoritarian regimes understand that the way to rule longevely and happily is apathy. Making society apathetic, making people don't believe, making people that they don't think it matters, atomizing people, and persuading people that there is nothing worth fighting for, which is one of the most dangerous aspects of social media, is what we call whataboutism. So the role of Putin, who masters this skill and influences elections all over Europe and supposedly even in the United States, is not to persuade that Russia is heaven. And democracy doesn't work. He just wants to persuade you that it's all the same shit. So there is nothing worth fighting. So this idea that, it's like, oh yeah, we do oppress journalists in Russia, but what about black people in, wherever? This what about? When you hear what about, that's it. So that moment where everything is a suspect of whataboutism is a very dangerous moment because the role of conspiracy theories, which are a very dominant part of this apathetic narrative, is not to lure people into doing stuff. Yes, some of these people get radicalized and do awful things. It's killing the human agency. So if everything is run by Rothschild and lizards and whatever the conspiracy theory of the day is, if vaccines are, coming from Wuhan lab or they are made by a powerful big pharma, then you worth nothing because there are master puppets that this idea, this is in the core of how you make people apathetic. Regardless of the fact that throughout the history you had zillions of examples where hobbits, common people, really raised up and changed things. So yes, human agency is imminent thing. We do have agency. The whole conspiracy theory narrative around so-called colored revolutions, which was fabricated in Kremlin after they lost Ukraine and Georgia in 2003 and 2004, this idea that, there is somebody from abroad fomenting this chaos.
Yeah, the outside agitators. Society itself is controlled by a bunch of conspiracy things, and then the people opposing it is just another conspiracy. It's just Soros paying the protesters.
Of course, but that comes with the way that these guys are seeing the world. Because there are a bunch of protests in my country, Serbia now, and they are sparked by the fact that the government spend zillions of money, mostly in corruption, opening the big train station. And then 3 months after ministers opening the train station, fell and killed 18 people because this is how good it was built.
Yeah.
And you have thousands of people protesting and the government saying, it's a cold revolution. It's sparked by deep state. It's like, because the main prerogative of these people is that people are sheep.
Yeah.
They don't see corruption. They don't get mad about the things. They don't genuinely want to live better. All they want to do is, scrolling their phones. And if they rise, it's because there is somebody from abroad who is master puppeting.
So it doesn't even matter the details of the conspiracies. The existence of people looking at conspiracies and spreading conspiracies says that there's not human agency. We are not creating this situation, and therefore we can't change it.
Absolutely. And the more you go down to this rabbit hole, the more you are ready to dismiss every idea for change because somebody red-pilled you. Like, that you are not going on the street because I'm helping the interest of the NATO or whatever is sold to you in this kind of stuff. Contemporary dictatorships rely a lot on this rabbit hole of human inactivity sparked by this type of communication. So the more, you can take a look at Russia, who is losing the war in Ukraine for 3 years now, who is internationally isolated completely, whose economy is into rubles, who doesn't have petrol anymore because the Ukrainians are successfully hitting their refineries. And you would expect people to mutiny, but they are not.
Yeah.
So it's like when you look at this example and then you figure out that
all of the Russian soldiers killed and all of this crazy, crazy war of invasion that doesn't make any sense. And yet the people in Russia see the conspiracy theories about,
we need to defend ourselves. So, shit
defend
like
the Russians,
Absolutely.
This or that Ukrainian is a neo-Nazi or...
But also coming back to the main topic, understanding how you change this is through personal example. And this is where the world of internet needs to be accompanied with the real world action. Because the real change happens in the real world. And yes, virtual media are very important for spreading messages or, debunking or imposing narratives. But this is not where people live. People live in a real world. And then eventually you can sell them all the bullshit about the conspiracy that you want. But when they go to the store and see prices rising up, they'll say, okay, this is not good. When they see train station falling and killing 16 people, it's like, who gives a shit what is on the Twitter? This is what I see with my own eyes in my own town. So understanding how you make examples of positive impact throughout the real world, understanding how the small acts of human agency are actual antidote for this type of thing is important. And on the other hand, talking about the technology, I think we are entering the age where we really need to figure out that we are witnessing the same as we witness the change in media space, moving from mainstream media into the internet, which is unfortunately better exploited by the bad actors on this planet. We have two more things that are happening now. One is this big evolution of money with Bitcoin, which is why activists and people around the globe need to understand that the change is coming and be on ahead of the change. Second thing that I'm very passionate about is understanding how you can use AI for good.
Yeah.
Because the AI is already used for bad. It's like if you imagine how many people in China may be sitting in a big room and feeding the powerful AI with how to contain the protests. I don't know where it is happening. I don't know if it's happening, but it's very likely that it is happening. How about you working on combining world knowledge about successful movement into ChatGPT?
Yeah.
And then you have a social change advisor in your phone.
Because as much as it is able to create any kind of artificial narrative, everything else, it also has the knowledge of all the history of social change. The funny thing about AI and the way it uses to manipulate, I interviewed Renee DiResta, who studied electoral interference, and Yoel Roth, who was in charge of Twitter's trust and safety team. And both of them said that the Russian disinformation attempts initially tried to make things up. Initially, they're like, let's set up a protest and we'll have both sides of the people show up to the protest and everything else. And eventually, what the Russian trolls figured out was they should just find messages that represented fraction points in American politics already and simply re-amplify and boost the things that were already there. Like their attempts to make anything new did not work, but their attempts to boost what already there did work. And what we'll now see, I think, with AI is the people who are effectively using it as digital propaganda aren't going to make something outrageous, unbelievable, totally new. What they do is they take things that are already sort of happening, that already fit with people's beliefs and fears, and just make more and more of it.
And this is where
they simulate the crowd effect.
This is once again where you really need to understand the power of technology. And one of the simplest thing is like, it's like if you zoom out of the blockchain Satoshi kind of thinking in Bitcoin, and you figure out, wow, look, the first thing the governments want to do when they want to shut down the protest is go after finances. Finances of their political opponent, finances of public figures that are opposing them, and finances of NGOs.
Yeah.
This is one-on-one playbook. It happened everywhere where you have a government becoming more authoritarian, they will first go after money.
So what does government have? Government has leverage around regulation.
Yeah, but then you have a Bitcoin, and this is how you can, like, you have one of the most oppressive junta regimes in the world is in Myanmar. They control the banks, they control the financial system. The people are functioning through Bitcoin. Through system of human ATMs, you're moving money into Burma, outside of the Burma, exiled societies in Thailand, from exiled societies in Thailand. So understanding how new technology can be used to bypass these restrictions is where we are. Understanding how you can use the positive narrative and human agency to tackle the misinformation and conspiracy theories is the way to go out. Understanding how you can use AI to really teach you how to do things step by step and think strategically instead of thinking like tactically or, organizing around the triggers is the way to go. And I see this powerful connection between practitioners of the democracy and human rights and people power movements and the technology, because there are good people in tech.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good people who are creating tech, and they're painfully aware that their tech can be used for good and bad, and they want it used for good. You have this marvelous publication done by Dario Amodei of Anthropic, The Machines of Better Grace, looking into how different it's kind of the manifesto for using tech for good. I really like it because it looks into the, scientific research, medical research, like all, not necessarily social engineering, but looking into all these things, figuring out how to use technology for these kind of purposes. The only way you can do it is if you pull people from the activist world into the people of the technology world.
Yep.
And this is where they can exchange. Because activists don't know what is available to them, and technologists don't know what activists may need.
Yeah.
And this is where this is why the work of Human Rights Foundation, the work of Canvas, the work of these groups that are trying to pull these groups together is so quintessential, because you need this chemistry to happen.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, I became politically active in the anti-globalization movement. I'd been an environmental activist and was in Seattle in the WTO protests in 1999. And one of the things that was really powerful for me was the idea that we could combine technology, the early internet stuff, and the social movements. We were the first people that I know about to live stream a protest
Oh, wow.
in 1999, the WTO protests. And this was an era before social media. This was an era which we said, okay, how do we take the web 1.0, the internet.com boom stuff and open source, and send those technologists to go meet with the activists? And we did that. We created a huge set of social movements and we empowered a bunch of people. And then we had a situation where a lot of those techniques ended up getting incorporated into big social media companies. And then we forgot that we had created it that way. And people are just like, well, I'll just use Twitter and I'll just use YouTube and I'll just use these things. And those platforms are really powerful. But the co-creation of the technologists and the activists is what is needed. And we need to not forget that it's a collaborative, co-creative process where, as a technologist, you need to be part of the activists. You need to show up. You need to understand what their problems really are, rather than making assumptions about the solution.
I agree with you 100%. And I've seen technology products that are, ranging from Bitcoin wallets into the small things. I was the part of an experiment to use, as you mentioned, AI in election monitoring. There is this amazing guy that I know, Paul Itoy, who, together with people from Guatemala, developed a really simple, technologically simple, even I can understand it, way to do it. So the way the election fraud works in majority of the countries is that, okay, the governments have more resources, they pay votes, and there are things becoming before the election day. On the election day, especially in the countries where votes are casted and tabulated manually by machines, the way it works is that you have this room where the election tally is counted once, twice, 3, 4 times, and then everybody on this table signs the piece of paper, acta if you're looking in Latin America, zapisnik if you're looking into Serbia, election record if you take a look at some other countries, and then the votes get altered later between here and the Central Electoral Commission.
Because where they're counted, you've got media observers. It's lots of attention.
You have real observers,
yes.
But then because you have 10,000 polling stations and government has a capacity to change things. So what's published at the end is not what's happening on the beginning. So there is this very simple engine, which we call Electa. If you have a photo of a voting record at the time where everybody signed it, you upload it and it goes onto the blockchain. So not only that it's stored as original, it's timestamped. So whatever you do later
that it's not,
in the election commission is fake.
Yeah.
Because I do have the thing. And then going into the world of social media, if you hashtag it and post it on social media, the AI can harvest it. And then they can compare, even if it's handwriting and it's like this kind of stuff, you train it to recognize the what it sees. So you can be before government in open source, if you want, that may be the future of free elections, maybe open sourcing election monitoring, because all you have to do is post. And that moment, whatever happens later, is becoming very doubtful legally, but also from the point of mobilization. Imagine Venezuela, one of the things they did wrong, they did amazing effort to cover 80%. That's very much in place like Venezuela of the voting tallies in the latest presidential elections. Around 15-20% of the vote count, they were absolutely sure that they are winning. They won 2/3, like Maduro got 1/3 of the votes. And then they were scanning these things, scanning these actas, putting them in PDFs, then on flash USBs, and then bringing them to their electoral headquarters that was in a foreign embassy. Bizarrely, Maduro didn't even let them tally the votes. And then they came out at one point and say, we won. And there is this link. And you can go to this link and see the election results. Well, guess what? The link was DDoSed by the government within 13 seconds. And even if you get to it, you need a Venezuelan voting ID to see the results. So you cannot see it, I cannot see it.
Yep.
So once again, this is where the power of networks come. If on one hand, you can document the real election result. On another hand, if you can put it on a social media, what will happen in any of these situations, and I've been following elections in dictatorships and semi-dictatorships since 1996.
Yeah.
The moment the people are seeing the government is losing in their stronghold.
Yeah.
That's the moment when they start going on the street.
Yeah.
So in Serbia, before internet, 2000, September 26th, it was not only to defend ballot boxes. It was not only to document the election results. We didn't have Twitter at the time. It was bringing this result to the opposition headquarters in a small place, then reading it loud from the balcony to the people. So people have real-time election update, more or less real-time. So whatever government says next morning, who gives a shit? So once again, making these things public.
Reliable, believable documentation of the reality of it.
So now imagine how with a very little effort, okay, the big effort is controlling the ballot boxes, but training people to photo document, upload, and hashtag the image, which is something that you know, it's like my 11-year-old son can do it. Probably faster than you and me. Figuring out how this can serve as an election integrity defending tool, but in the same time as a mobilization tool. This thing costs very little.
Yeah.
So what if you can start thinking about developing AI in that direction? And not only in a fucked up places in terms of democracy like Venezuela. US may need that as well.
Yeah.
You need to have a golden standard of how people can approach elections and defend their integrity. Getting back to your original question about the US, people in democratic countries that are afraid of autocratic tendencies of their leaders need to figure out that democracy is like love. You need to make it every day. This is not something that is given to you for granted.
Yeah.
You need to
it's not something you do every 4 years.
You need to participate daily in keeping your governments accountable, from the level of president to the level of the school board. Last week, I was in a meeting in my school district in Colorado, where people were discussing the things regarding the schools, and we have elections for a school board every 2 or 3 years, and I'm personally not very happy with who is sitting there.
Yeah. They
took out 30 pages. That was the issue. I was not a part of the debate because my kids are K5 and this was happening in a high school. They took the sexual education thing, they took it from the textbook, like physically. So you have a textbook, it has a content, it says that it is there in a content, but they came with no kind of things.
Yeah.
It's like, this is where you keep your school board accountable.
Yeah.
For whatever reasons they decide to do it, and then you figure out who are these people, where they are elected, where they live, how you address to them, what is the pillar which is above them, how you dismantle them. It's like, once again,
what is their sword of power? How did they end up in power?
Absolutely.
When
are the next election?
Yeah.
So it's like,
what are all their competing loyalties?
So once again, it's not only about thinking about how your government can be called accountable. Democracy, people power, future AI, understanding of these skills is something that, and I know these people need this because I was in this meeting and I've seen people being outraged, but didn't know what to do. This is democracy, and participation starts at this point where you are not only able to be pissed off, but have a human agency to say, okay, come on, man, who is paying you?
Yeah.
It's like, you're doing this shit, who is paying you?
Yeah.
It's my taxpayers' money that's paying you. This is where you try to keep government accountable. And people often mobilize more likely, especially in the United States, about things that hits their pocket. There was this amazing movement in my state a few years ago. There was a little piece of highway, 40 miles of highway built between Denver and where I live, Colorado Springs. And they wanted to make it a toll
road, yeah.
But then somebody start writing somebody take a look at the checkbooks and figure out that it was built by a taxpayer's money. It's like, wait. It's like, I'm giving you my money, so you're building.
We already paid our tax dollars to build the road.
And then you're going to tell me how this is going to work. It ended up on a court, and it ended up with having only a fast lane being tolled, and only if there are less than 3 people in a car and stuff like that. But this is exactly how you should be thinking. You are the boss of your government. It's not the opposite, but they are a reason why public servants are called public servants. Okay,
yeah,
there is a reason why word servant is in there. They are serving the public because the public is saving them. The moment you understand this is where the conspiracy theories go to sink, and you figure out that you, as a taxpayer, have power, have rights, and you need to exercise these rights.
The conspiracy theories which drive these things, basically they undermine the idea that you have power. It's that somehow this is all the result of just some shadowy person who has made a decision and not structural dynamics in society.
Absolutely. And you can hear it on the meeting where people are complaining about the textbook, and there is this endless war of the people who are, these guys are connected to this church and this is why they're doing, and they're coming from whatsoever. And then the other guy is standing up and saying, this is all because all of this transgender bullshit. It's like you see the Twitter in small in this room. Okay, yeah. There's like 15 people in a room. And you're like, okay, guys, sit down. There's 15 of you in this room. If you take your phones out, you can probably find 5, 6, 7. I probably have 10 numbers of parents of my kids at school. So that accounts for 150 people. Now, we can bring the group of 150 people within 2 days. With 150 people, you can exercise more than 100 different tactics of nonviolent struggle. So it's like there is a power in your snowflake, in your personal connections. It's whether you want to sit down, start looking at the situation, figure out who done what, figure out what the solution may be, figure out what the pillars are, and then we assemble people and just do the shit. And that shit doesn't necessarily need to be ideological or partisan or religious, non-religious. It's just the fact that somebody robbed the textbook that I pay from 30 pages because of whatever reasons. And I want to know who that person is, who is paying this person, and how I can fire it.
Yeah.
This is what I'm interested
in. What is the power structure that puts them in the position of being able to make these decisions?
And once again, you are sitting in a room with 15 people who are discussing the school district issue. And if these people properly think, imagine if they have this on the little AI. Mm-hmm. So here am I sitting on a school board meeting, and the AI tells you, okay, what is the power structure? Who is in charge? Who is superintendent? Where is the school district headquarters? When are the elections for a school board? Was there a voting about it that was public? So when school district people vote, it gets in a public record. Who voted for this? So you end up with identifying 3 or 4 people who have done it. Mm-hmm. And now you know whom to talk. Or whom to complain, or whom to fire.
You know who to pressure, and you know what the pillars of their
So you don't need a genius of Jim Lawson understanding connection between buses, users of buses, companies, and a governor of Alabama. All you will have to do is just talk to something that you're talking every day when you're making your email. So, I mean, there is once again, but this strategic thinking doesn't come naturally to the people. When it comes to the social change, people are very prone to be quiet until something triggers them. Then they respond to the trigger. Then they're angry. And when you look in one of the Bibles of the American liberals, Saul Alinsky's book Rule for Radicals, you may understand that anger is a powerful mobilizer, but anger without hope, without vision, without idea what you want to achieve, is a destructive force per se.
Yeah.
Because when you get people angry, they tend to burn things. When you take a look at this, and especially in the era of social media, where people are communicating and moving into their own echo chambers, they tend to encourage each other's anger.
So
in these echo
we have
chambers.
These cycles of angers, and I know that you have written about and done research into play, into humor, and the way it plays in the resistance. So if anger leads to this destructive cycle, what is it about creativity and humor and play that creates a positive vision for social change?
That's an excellent question. It started by Serbs being Serbs and mocking Milošević. And we make jokes about everything, and everything sounds like coming from Monty Python's slang. This is the way we communicate, okay? So we were the group of 50 people at the time, and there was this solar eclipse. And it was a big deal, and people were like, oh, shall we go to the street? Shall we hide our kids? Which type of glasses we should wear? It's like it was a fucking curfew all day long. So people were like really obsessed with this thing. So day before this, we came to the idea that, the idea of the falling star. So we came in front of the Serbian Academy of Science, which is a symbolic place where science lives, and build a cardboard telescope. It was like 4 meters long. It was hell to carry. And it was looking like it was made by 11-year-old. But what happen when you take a look at it, at the end, there was a little Milošević head in the shape of a falling star. So because the people were tying this, it's like the moment of solar eclipse is where, something will be announced and bullshit. So we came to this idea. It's like what we learn about this solar eclipse is the guy is falling. Look, he's falling down. And there's hundreds of people were queuing to take a look at this ridiculous object.
Yeah.
While we were holding the object. And within the range of 5 minutes, we got coverage by Reuters and AFP and all this because it's so photogenic. And if you're a journalist, this is what you want.
And if you just said Milošević is this dictator and he's doing these terrible things, everything else, and we believe he'll fall down, that's not a story.
Yeah, but also we record the moment of stories when you have this type of hype. So every single media outlet will be talking about the solar eclipse. And by the way, you have a story from Belgrade where people do ba, 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 ba. It's a candy. For journalists, it's a candy. It's photogenic. It has a great background story. It makes a good political thing. And it has people doing something funny and having fun. So it's like for camera, it's great. Even in the age of Twitter, you can make such a perfect, Instagram reel out of this within the second. What we were doing, we were mocking, poking. So next time when we do it was with a barrel. So there's this petrol barrel with Milošević's face on it. We had an artist. So he did it through the cardboard stuff. So it was looking very industrial, very cyberpunk, if you want. So we put it in the main shopping district, and there was a hole on the top so you can put a coin, and by in a pinball game, by putting a coin in, then you get a baseball bat. And for a coin, you can hit him 3 times. And then the next person, and then the next person. So it makes a big noise. So within 15 minutes, you have 200 people with their shopping bags because it's in front of the mall, queuing, it's to do this, and the kids kicking it with legs, and it was ridiculous. So we moved to the nearby cafe, ordered espresso, and watch what is going to happen. It was not the fun part when the people having fun. The fun part was when police arrived. Because what the heck will they do?
Yep.
Okay, so here's they are told to stop this.
Yes.
They have the order to stop this. But
they're insulting the leader.
They're not trained to stop this. First, there is nobody to arrest because we are not there. Obviously, we are somewhere else. B, if they
arrest a barrel,
downtown shoppers, take them to the police station and accuse them for what exactly? So they know that there will be, people will be pressing charges against them. It's like that you don't arrest somebody with a shopping bag who is hitting the barrel. There's no law against. They arrested the barrel. So it's and then, of course, it was, people still have cell phones, and it was, of course, the cover page of the tomorrow's opposition newspaper.
And it shows the ridiculousness of the state and the police. Instead of the police being this scary, violent, dangerous thing, the police are these clowns.
Punchline. So this is where it becomes the thing we call loftivism, which is a combination of activism and laughter. But it doesn't start with a joke. It starts with something we call dilemma action. And there is a little book that is free on Amazon that is called Pranksters versus Autocrats, where we assembled 20 or 30 amazing anecdotes about this. And then we start working with the Penn State University with Sophia McLennan, who is one of the largest American experts in political satire. And we build a database. So you go to www.tactics4change, with 4 being number, not the word. We documented 450 cases throughout the century from all countries in the world where people were using dilemma actions. And dilemma action is putting your opponent between rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
So if they take a look at this thing, if they leave the barrel standing on the street and people do it and know that they can get away with it, you'll have barrel in every city.
Yes.
So inaction will show that you are weak.
Yeah.
And then if you arrest barrel, then you look stupid. So you pick between weak and stupid, which is very bad choice to pick. So taking a look into this and understanding this dilemma framework, getting back to the beginning of the conversation, this is strategic use of tactic. You want to put your opponent into lose-lose scenario, but you first of all, you need something which is called the widely held belief, which is people have the right to express their political opinion, even if that means hitting the barrel. You had zillions of creative tactics. In oppressive societies like Belarus, you cannot assemble more than 5 people. If it's 6 people, it's a political rally.
Yeah.
And it needs to be declared. So Belarusians are getting into the main city park, the most public place in Minsk, with all these statues of heroes and stuff like that. And there is 6 of them. It's not 4 of them. It's not 10,000 of them. It's exactly the one over the 5, okay?
Yes.
And what they do, they walk in circle and read Constitution loud. So now you have a choice between imposing the 5-person law on 6-person, but then you're arresting the people for reading the state constitution loud, which makes you look not really clever. So, and then it outrages people, and then the people start noticing the movement. And then, so we were measuring this on every single metrics. Movement that use dilemma actions and humor are 15% more likely to succeed, historically. Movement that use dilemma actions and humor are 30% more likely to gain media sympathy. Movements that use these things, like one of the things that we were checking also is replicability.
Yeah.
So if you do something like that, everybody else wants to do something like that. So from every single aspect,
and it's relative. You can perceive it and then do it. Like, so
from every single aspect, these things are, they work. They work scientifically. We teamed up with scientists. We built a database, like the serious thing. This is not I'm saying, oh, this is great. No, there is a scientific breakdown of these kind of stuff. So instead of just being angry, you can be strategic. You can put your opponent in a dilemma. And yes, the grain of humor helps, because the humor, regardless of its effect on a social change, go back to the engine of autocracy. First of all, humor breaks fear. If you are preparing for a major surgery and the doctor comes in and say, hey, Rabble, we're going to open your chest and we're going to put this thing in and this is where I'm going to cut, you're like, I don't need to know everything. Instead of that, if your friend comes and cracks a joke, you immediately lose fear.
Yeah.
It is how
it breaks the tension.
It is how the dopamine suppress adrenaline. This is chemistry of your brain. It has nothing to do with social science. Everything to do with your biology. Then the humor breaks apathy. Remember, fear, apathy. You are on a very boring part. You're sipping your beer and you want to go home. Immediately, somebody who cracks great jokes comes in and everybody gathers around that person and you feel like, oh, I'm staying. There is something funny happening there. So fear, apathy, and the last thing, one of the reasons when the movements become successful for many different reasons, one of them is when they become cool.
Yep.
So everybody wants to be around the cool people. Everybody wants to be the part of something cool. What is more cool than using humor to mock these guys? And then the last instance is the response. So a lot of people power is jujitsu or judo. This martial art in which you use the strength of your opponent to put your opponent on their back. So here we are, Russia, 2012, stolen elections. People recorded stuffing ballot boxes and stuff like that. And the people were protesting in big cities, and Putin was clever to leave them protesting in the big cities, but they couldn't protest in smaller places because it was banned. So Barnaul, Siberia, in the middle of a very rural area, 2,000 people. It's like it's a village, it's not a town. And they came to the idea that if they cannot protest, their toys can. So they build a little toy city. Like the city square is the size of this room, and there is this place with the monument, and then they put like everybody brought like this little Lego soldiers and a little, from Kinder eggs and little toy cars, and everybody was wearing a transparent. 143% for Putin. Give us free and fair elections.
Yep.
So the whole protest is like 2 square meters. And there is actual footage, because there was a German journalist there, and she taped the thing. And there is the actual footage from the protest where you see like 15 or 17 people and all 3 policemen from the village, like the whole police, the power of the police force. And everybody's taping and like nobody's, like there is no clash. It's like very peaceful. And then it goes on a YouTube and gets 750,000 views in the first hour.
And that's the way the social media works. You instead of having the direct confrontation of power, you use humor.
And then you go there. And everybody
people want
to
see it. Then it's funny. Then they want to participate. Then they want to share it.
And now somebody is watching it from Kremlin.
And then the state isn't so scary when you've made fun of them.
Yeah, but then somebody understands this in Kremlin. So they are having this dilemma what to do.
Do they send the police in to go destroy the diorama?
They call the chief of police from Barnaul. And next day, when they want to repeat the whole prank with more cameras, the chief of police goes in front of the camera and states that the toy protest in Barnaul is banned. Probably the most stupid statement in the history of the police force. Because by constitution, only Russian citizens can protest. And I don't know,
toys can't protest.
China, yeah. They are made in China. Toys can protest or whatever. And he ends up on the cover page of Guardian. So now this is jiu-jitsu. It's not the protest itself which propels it to skyrocket. It is the reaction that, because it's like, then your title in Guardian is like, toy protest ban in Russia. My God. If you're a journalist, this is what you want.
Yeah.
Everybody will give you the cover page for this, or 3 million views. I mean, wherever you are posting.
It's not a sad story about the election being stolen.
And the people
it's
being
a joyful story
and
about
you have a photo
them banning
of a
toys.
toy soldier with the transparent. I mean, that's exactly shareable, clickable, likable. People want to dig in it. And you don't need to explain that Russia is autocracy. Russia is that country where even fucking toys cannot protest. That tells everything. You don't need a big, long post around that. And also along these lines, understanding how this really hurts the narrative. Okay, this is Vladimir Putin, the guy who loves to pose shirtless, wrestle with bears, saving dolphins.
A strong man, he's going to come in and just, whip everybody into shape.
And he's afraid of toys. No, this is where the genius of dilemma action leftivism is not only that you are making your opponent doing stupid things, you're also hurting the very basis of his narrative. And through this study on tactics for change, you figure out that it's exactly where you want to hit. You want to hit this discrepancy between the fake reality, which is we have a strong man, we have a well-organized state, and the real reality. And this is when it becomes violent. So this where it really impacts people is that when you expose corruption in a weird and bizarre way, when you expose tyranny in a weird and bizarre way, when you expose the flaws or narcissism or self-obsession of your leader.
The contradictions in the system.
But this is also where they freak out.
Yeah.
Because they can't stand being hated.
Because they want to be loved.
They want to be loved, but they can't stand being hated because the haters are those paid by lizards and Rothschilds and so on. They have explanation for being hated.
Yeah. And
being hated actually is not weakening them. They love being feared. What they cannot stand is being mocked.
Yeah.
And very, very often, and there is a parallel investigation that we did on this data set, it works better in autocracy. Autocrats, the more autocratic the system, the more the leader is going to freak out and do something stupid.
And causing them, using humor to show the contradiction in the system and cause them to freak out is what resonates with people and undermines the existing system.
Absolutely.
You don't destroy an autocracy by having more weapons and defeating it because it has a monopoly on that violence. You destroy it by making its contradictions and the belief in the system and the belief that they actually are competent strongmen fall apart. And then the policemen themselves and the military and all these other pillars of power stop being able to support it.
But also they start hating the whole thing, because it's like if you are a police and, understanding the notion that you made, which is very important, very often in autocracy, that the straw that broke camel's back is the pillar of oppression pulling back. And we knew that we are winning on October the 5th, 2000, when the million of people were congregating to Belgrade. And we figure out that the police will build barricades, but it will not defend it. It's like
they were ordered to build the barricades, and so they're like, they went and they build the barricade,
and then they move and light the cigarette and let us go through the barricade. So it's like, there was no conflict.
They no longer believed.
They no longer believed. They didn't want to be in that ship. And the reason for this, one of the reasons for this, was the fact that for 2 years at that point, my movement was like 2 years in a building at that point. We made so many situations where they were ordered to do so many stupid things that a lot of them were thinking, it's like, fuck, is this why I signed for police? It's like, you get into security forces because you have an urge or mission to serve and to protect, not to arrest toys. And the more ridiculous you create...
And you have this idea that there are violent criminals out there. There are people who are dangerous. There are people who are robbing and killing people. If you see yourself as fighting the dangerous Antifa super soldiers who are really going to hurt you...
And then you're faced with inflatable dinosaurs?
Then you're faced with an inflatable dinosaur, and you are now arresting a clown or inflatable dinosaur or someone blowing bubbles. Then you can no longer believe that you are doing the protecting society against this violence.
Yeah, but you also feel very bad. And we talked to the police in Serbia that was involved in, especially the local police. And it all ended up as a play, because there was a moment in time where Otpor was publicly declared by the government as a terrorist organization, which was kind of bullshit because we were not even registered. But there was like this idea that they will put you into the terrorism bucket so they can justify to arrest you just for wearing a t-shirt or something like that. And then the police was ordered to go to high schools and arrest high school kids who are wearing the t-shirts. In most of the cases, this is the high school where the kids of these policemen go.
Yeah.
Because this is a small village.
And some of them are their kids.
Yeah, it's like village has 3 high schools. It's like if you are up to arrest people, you will need to arrest them in one of them. And then eventually your kid will go into one of them. It ended up with police doing things that it was ordered to do, but doing it so reluctantly, like when I was arrested 6 times in a row. This is how it's, okay, I need to arrest you. Okay, so can you please go with me in a police station?
Yeah.
Okay, can you please sign here?
And instead of them thinking, oh, I'm out, I've got this terrorist, I've got this person. Like they no longer believe in the enforcement because you've undermined it with humor.
There is also another little textbook that we built called Making Oppression Backfire, which looks into this plan B. So what my movement was doing, and later a lot of successful movements were doing this, and not only because they learned it from us, but because it's how a machine works. So what happens when somebody gets arrested illegally, detained illegally, brought to the police station? There is this chain of command, people will go in front of the police station and do something very peacefully. We'll give them choke, so they will use the choke on the boards, like no provocations, to signal the guy in a police station that they are not alone. Uh-huh. And then somebody will call a lawyer. And before people get into this situation, they have all blank authorizations with the lawyer. We had the free lawyers that were having your names signed, so they appear as your lawyers.
Yeah, so they already know that they're representing
absolutely. And then your parents and friends will go inside and ask for you. And then on the outer chain of this were the retired people, because we had a lot of retired people supporting us who couldn't go to the demonstrations. So what will happen is they will get the phone number of the police station. And because they're retired people, they have a lot of time in their hands. So they'll go, okay, hey, there is this boy called Rabble. Why did you arrest him? He's so cool. Oh, wouldn't you be rather arresting the criminals and a drug dealer? It's like 78-year-old lady. And then the next call, and then like 911 wasn't existing in that moment. Yeah. So put yourself in the shoes of the police. You're arresting a teenager because he's wearing a t-shirt. You're getting into the high school where your kid is going. So you will go home and need to answer the question from your kid, okay? You already see the rest of your day.
You see the same thing happening right now in the UK, where there's the group Palestine Action that goes off and they destroyed arms and, broke things in direct action, and then were declared a terrorist organization. And then people hold some signs and they're just sitting there in a park saying, I support Palestine Action. And then they're being arrested for supporting terrorism. And it's so clearly not a case of terrorism because these are grandmothers and people in wheelchairs and stuff.
Yeah, but also
and it undermines the conception of what is terrorism.
It's so clearly not going to be prosecuted. So one of the things that you understand as a police officer is that you are making the first step in some legal process. So you're arresting a person for violating the law, and then there will be charges, and then there will be court, and then there will be sentence. But you're obviously sent to the high school to politically abuse, a 18-year-old kid. And you know that the moment that kid steps in a police station, there will be a wreaking havoc of lawyer, his friends, demonstrations, phone calls, and then he will walk free out of that door and become dating star for the next 15 days. You couldn't get a date in 90s in Serbia if you were not arrested. Being arrested,
you made it sexy,
making you the most sexy human in the history of the world. And this is like playing a guitar in a top rock band. Everybody wants to be with you if you are that guy with a megaphone. So not only that oppression doesn't scare you, it actually produces the counter effect where people are lining up to get arrested because this is how they will get laid. And this is a very powerful thing to move people in their early 20s.
Yeah.
If they think they will get dates, if they think they will get laid, they will do the shit. And once again, this is how movement becomes cool.
Yep.
And then the police is making it cooler and cooler by getting into this ridiculous thing. And then, of course, they send this to the judge. And the judge takes a look at the charges and say, okay, this is a 16-year-old boy sitting in a class in his high school. What are the charges? Well, he's wearing a T-shirt. Okay, so then he's looking into the law and sees that, you cannot wear a swastika on a T-shirt because it's a fascist thing, but there is nothing about a clenched fist in the law. So it's like, what the fuck will I do with this? They were not even accepting these charges anymore, the judges, because they were flooded with them all day long, and they knew that if they put it in front of the jury, they will look like idiots.
Yeah, and the jury won't convict because it has to be a jury of your peers. And you're like, this is not an actual violent situation. And then you can make social media about it. You make a presentation, you make it spread, everything else, and then you muck up the system.
And then in the 21st century, it's pretty obvious that in these situations when you have videos, it's like not only cameras on the police. We didn't have the cameras on the police. People are taping everything. So it's like, if you press violent charges against somebody, you better have violence on the camera, because if these other guys have no violence on the camera, then you are toasted in court.
We have talked about the history of this. We've talked about these repressive governments. You've trained activists all over the world. And we are in a moment where people are concerned about authoritarian regimes. They're concerned about the protection of democracy. Where do they go to learn more?
Well, one way to go is take a look at the www.canvasopedia.org, which is my little organization. Another way to think of it is taking a look at amazing books that are around, Blueprint for Revolution being one of them, Tactics for Change being a website about the creative tactics, but also looking into the great work of organizations like Human Rights Foundation, which are doing this globally. So there is a plentitude of resources if people want to learn, but they need to understand the two things. First, it has to be you. So unlike whatever conspiracy theorists tell you, nobody in the world can tell you, what do you want to do? You need to know what you want to do, and then there is a plenty of resources for you how to do it effectively.
Yeah.
But it is your decision. You need to get engaged, and then eventually, in any given democracy in the world, democracy is not for granted. It was pretty conservative president of the United States, Ronald Reagan, that I love to quote, who says that democracy is always one generation far from extinction. And I think if people don't practice democracy, if people don't get engaged, regardless of the level of democracy in your society, then we are toasted and we are giving it to the guys in power to manipulate us, to steal from us, and to eventually use social media to persuade us that it is all puppet mastered and the human agency doesn't exist. Human agency does exist. Human agency is the way to defend democracy.
Thank you very much. That was amazing.
Thanks again to Srđa Popović for coming on Revolution.Social. Our intro and outro music is a remix of the Italian anti-fascist song Bella Ciao, courtesy of White Records.
This episode was edited and produced by Eric Johnson from lightningpod.fm. Our executive producer is me, Alice Chan from Flock Marketing.
To learn more about the Social Media Bill of Rights and sign up for our email newsletter, visit Revolution.Social.
And for more interviews like this one, follow Revolution.Social on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, nostasfountain.fm, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And to paraphrase the Zapatista subcomandante Marcos, we need a social media revolution to make revolution possible. We'll be back next week. See you then.